Good evening, everybody. Welcome to whichever Pinkin channel this happens to find you on. I'm Connor Southwell. Welcome to our Friday night preview show, looking ahead to Norwich City's trip to Cardiff City tomorrow in the league. Of course, it goes without saying we are in the middle of a transfer window, so no doubt I'm sure plenty of you out there have questions, comments that you'd like to get them to get in. I'm joined by Paddy Dowett, who hopefully will appear on screen. There we go, by magic. So any comments and questions you have for us, do get them in and we'll try and go through them within the next half an hour or so. But Paddy, I would imagine that the interest is going to begin with a certain Greek left back. We've been trying to nail the pronunciation of it. I'll have the first go.
You're going with?
Well, I'm going to go with Dimitris Giannoulis, and then I'll leave it to you to improve on that or adapt it slightly. But just talk to us a little bit about him. How close do you think this one is? Because it looks by all sort of it looks like it's going to happen and it's going to happen fairly soon.
Yeah, I'm going Giannoulis, Connor, just because it's easier for me rather than going to the G and the I. We won't get into that. But I mean, you probably want to come back on this because you've spoken to a few colleagues in terms of media, Greek end of this. So they certainly, all the noises coming out of the Greek end of this potential deal suggest it's pretty much there. What we know this end, we obviously, take soundings from the people who matter at Norwich, and yes, very much a player they want to bring in. They feel that the deal is there, and it's for me a very, very astute piece of business given how highly he seems to be rated, but his contractual situation, he's out of contract in 2022. So essentially, this is probably the last window his club, PAOK Saloniki, can really get a decent amount of money for him. But even then, you get the sense from certainly on social media that Norwich are probably getting a bit of a snip in terms of the figures that are being bandied about from what we're led to believe. Probably not the higher end of those ranges. I've seen everything from a loan fee, which will be the initial 6 months, and then triggered if they get into the Premier League, a permanent deal. I've seen everything from 5 to 800,000 euros in terms of the loan aspect, and then a permanent anything from 7 to 8.5 million. It's going to be the lower end of that scale, from what we're led to believe. I've seen reports of a 4.5-year deal. So all those elements tied together tells you that that lad, and of course we've also in this morning. Coming out of Greece again, reports that he's heading to England this weekend. So I don't think he'll be featuring for PAOK. I think they've got a game on Sunday, haven't they? If I'm not mistaken. So if he's getting on a plane and he's heading to England, then from what we know from the Norwich end, that's probably going to get pulled over the line in the next 3 or 4 days, and then it's just when Norwich opt to announce it. They've got a midweek game against Bristol City. Do they wait until after that, or do they want to push it out there? With the caveat, of course, the guy's not going to be available for the foreseeable because, coming from Greece, he's going to have to self-isolate for a 10-day period. So maybe that allows them not to necessarily rush it out. This whole elements they're going to have to deal with in terms of getting his medical done, even finalising the paperwork side of thing, all within this sort of the backdrop of the pandemic and what they're allowed to do in terms of socially distanced. With a guy who's travelling in from another part of Europe. So probably a few little headaches in terms of the administrative elements, but the nuts and bolts of it are he is probably going to be a Norwich player by this time next week. And, from what we're starting to find out about him, he looks like a very talented young man, certainly fits the profile of what they're trying to do. And, you and I, Connor, spoke to somebody who knows, we won't put his name out there, but you can probably work out who. And they made it quite clear that in this window, they were going to try and target a left-back who they felt, not necessarily for the here and the now, but could potentially, bit of water to flow under the bridge. But if Norwich are in the Premier League next season, that this guy would be a viable Premier League option. And you look at his profile, 25 years of age, he's got 11 caps for Greece, vying with Tsimikas, the lad who ultimately went to Liverpool when they flirted with Jamal Lewis. He's won the Greek title. He's got 2 cups under his belt as well. He looks like a guy with plenty of potential to maybe turn out to be a very good acquisition for a Premier League season. So, yeah, it's all very positive. Obviously, not the I's and the T's dotted and crossed yet. So we can't say definitively he is a Norwich City player, but barring any last-minute twists to this plot, I think Norwich have got their first man in the door in January.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mapped up there lots of pedigree. He's played in the Europa League this season as well. Some Champions League qualifiers as well. Rather, I think they finished third in Group E in the Europa League behind PSV and a team that has escaped my mind. I want to say a Spanish team, but I'm sure someone will look it up and remind us. So in terms of the Brexit work permit, he does have enough to qualify because of the international caps, because of the fact he's playing in a major league, albeit a slightly lesser band, and because of the continental competitions. There we go, got it out in the end.
I thought you might have an issue with Giannoulis, but I didn't think you'd have an issue with speaking plain English, mate, today.
It's all getting muddled. Well, on that front, actually, that we have had someone get in touch with us. There we go, Ollie, who said, "Hey guys, I used to live in that part of Greece," which I'm not even going to try and pronounce. So I have a lot of friends who are fans of his club. Seems a good player, and he's pronounced Dimitris Giannoulis, just as Paddy said. Good job as always. There you go. You've obviously got a little bit of Greek in there somewhere.
Well, we won't get, because this will get very boring, but I did live with a lad from Greece for about 18 months here in Norwich before my wife intervened, and I no longer live the bachelor life. That's a different story. So maybe that rubbed off for me. Fair play, George, if you're watching.
There you go. You've obviously picked up some sort of Greek knowledge on your way. But yeah, you're right. And in terms of how you mapped out there will be plenty of people, as I have seen already on social media and via our platforms and whatnot, have said, well, Norwich have already got a left back with an option to buy. This is a similar deal in terms of that regard, but an obligation rather than an option, as is the case with Xavi Quintilla, based upon whether they get promoted. Very similar to the Ben Gibson sort of structure in terms of how this deal is reportedly structured. Obviously, we don't know that for sure at this stage. Just give us your thoughts on maybe the dynamic and also what Daniel Farke had to say today about Xavi Quintilla, because I think there'll be a few people that see Giannoulis coming in through the door. I think I said it right that time. So there we go. Coming in through the door, and we'll maybe wonder what this means for Xavi Quintilla and his future at Norwich City. So from your perspective, what did Daniel Farke have to say about that today?
Yeah, he was good. He didn't dance around it. Inevitably, he's not going to be drawn on a potential signing, as he said, as we would have expected him to say. He's not his player, so he doesn't comment on speculation, rumour, whatever, until the deal is done. Then he'll obviously talk chapter and verse, I'm sure, about this player. But who is his player, certainly for this season, is Xavi Quintilla, sorry. And he reaffirmed that it doesn't mean potentially Giannoulis comes in and then Xavi goes back to his parent club in Spain, Villarreal. No. As he made it quite clear, and as we've all seen, Xavi Quintilla hasn't been available for quite a considerable portion of those first 23 league games, and they've had to go with a young man from Denmark who was bought as a central midfielder, and what a job he's done. And Daniel acknowledged that today, Jakob Sorensen, not only to get the team or players part collectively and the team get into the top of the table, but staying there as well. And I think he's just got better and better in that role, actually. Obviously, he was redeployed last weekend in the FA Cup in his more favoured position because Xavi was available. But sadly, the news today, he's one of two more positive COVID tests. Barley Mumba, the other one, in recent days, and he's now having to self-isolate. So not going to be available tomorrow, probably going to be Jakob Sorensen again tomorrow. But moving forward, if this time next week Norwich have another left-back on the payroll, Xavi Quintilla will remain, and Daniel said he's still a key part of the plans, because ultimately, both the injury absence for Xavi and now obviously the fact that he's tested positive and he's going to miss a game or two for COVID, it just underlines how light they have been in that area of the squad. And Daniel feels they need two, as he said, natural left-sided defensive options moving forward. And, I don't think anybody would disagree with that. So as it stands, and we take Daniel at his word, then Xavi Quintilla is going nowhere in this window. He'll stay here and fulfil the rest of his season-long loan. And I guess it'll be, if Giannoulis is in the building, it'll be go on, fight it out, much as it is with the central defenders, as it is maybe in those midfield areas. And then we'll see who prevails. But ultimately, I think Giannoulis is going to be the longer-term option. So it's up to Xavi to respond. But, you cut it difficult for the lad maybe to try and get his head around that he's been brought in as Norwich's first choice for this season, and then halfway through the next window opens and Norwich are looking to bring in another left back, but ultimately Stuart Webber and Daniel Farke have to safeguard Norwich in the here and now over the next few months, and then ultimately construct a squad which is good enough to compete again in the Premier League. So that's basically where we are. So he'll have to get on with that, get his head down and keep working. And obviously, hopefully, first and foremost, his health, is unaffected by testing positive for coronavirus, and he's able to come back post his isolation period and resume, which I think on balance, there's areas of his game maybe defensively you could question, but he certainly added something in terms of an attacking dimension to Norwich, and Daniel was happy with what he saw from him in the FA Cup last weekend. So, I wouldn't necessarily call time on his Norwich career just yet, but inevitably, if you're bringing in a lad for potentially many, many millions, then he is the one, you feel is going to be your longer term option. But of course, he'll have to adapt, much as Xavi did, to English football and the Championship in particular. So, I don't think we're quite going to be seeing a changing of the guard immediately, but ultimately, it's quite clear that Norwich feel this is the guy who's going to be their left back for the next few seasons.
Absolutely. We'll hear from Daniel Farker on the transfers that they're hoping to do this window in just a moment, and we'll take a few of your questions as well, and then we'll talk about the positive COVID cases and Cardiff. Just to round off the debate about Giannoulis, he is regarded by some and some sort of Greek journalists that we've been speaking to in the last 24 hours, 48 hours, as one of the best in Greece. He was actually probably Newcastle's alternative for Jamal Lewis in the summer. Has also been linked to Porto and Atalanta, I think, as well. So that goes to show how highly thought of he is in the game. I spoke to a friend of mine who works in data with various football clubs, not Norwich City, but various other EFL football clubs, and he said he's very, very good, and probably said more similar to perhaps a Jamal Lewis than a Xavi Quintilla in the way that he plays. So it's going to be interesting to see how he adapts, particularly given that him and Quintilla will probably end their 10-day isolations at probably around the same time. Quintilla probably a little bit earlier. Here's what Daniel Farke had to say at his press conference today about their plans for the January transfer window.
I think we have the responsibility to make sure that we're prepared for each and every case. And also right now, the COVID case with Xavi shows how quick. I think we have the responsibility to make sure that we're prepared for each and every case. And also right now, the COVID case with Xavi shows how quick there could be a problem. For that, I think it's necessary to stay aware. So I can't confirm that we will definitely sign a left fullback, but we try to do this because this is one of the positions where we are perhaps even a bit weak in our squad, and I think it would definitely help us. But again, so it's just anyhow in order to make sure that we have at least two options, and we have also right now with Jacob also a solid option who can play in this role, but we still judge him even a bit more like a midfield player. Although he has proved with him, we went up to the top and defended also our top spot anyhow, and pretty pleased with how we deal with this. But it doesn't take anything away with that. Of course, I think we should try to sign a natural left fullback without any doubt. Same a bit with the goalkeeper position. I think our situation on the centre back position has eased up a little bit. Although Christoph is right now also injured, but hopefully then also available for the Bristol game. But also during these times, you have to stay aware, and if there is an opportunity even on this position, I think we have to stay awake till the end of the window.
There you go, Daniel Farke. So good. You saw the beginning of it twice. He also confirmed in there, reiterated Norwich after a goalkeeper, which again we've kind of mapped out, and also potentially a centre back. Although he said the situation had eased, didn't he, with Omar Dilay's progress, as well as obviously the three they've got at the moment not suffering an injury. So that seems like the perfect time to take some of your questions, because I already see on the right side of my screen a lot of these questions we're getting are about transfers. We'll start with Maureen and John White. Thank you very much for watching. They have both said, presumably, hi, all looks like a good deal for Norwich with a view to a full-time deal. Any more inside info on a goalkeeper? Well, on that goalkeeping position, it is a very difficult position they're trying to recruit for, essentially someone that's going to be happy to play second fiddle to Tim Krul on a short-term basis, probably till the summer. Obviously, as we've reported this week, the name that they are looking at is Orlan Nyland, who, of course, was at Aston Villa, played post-Project Restart, probably most known for, certainly in this country at least, carrying the ball over the line in that instant against Sheffield United that Hawkeye missed. Pad obviously Norwich have held talks with his representatives, but it hasn't been a deal that is yet done, and given it hasn't been done before Cardiff, and maybe the longer it goes on, the more maybe you get a little bit of a feeling that Norwich might be looking elsewhere along what is, we understand, a very, very long list.
Yeah, I mean, I was told, I said before we went live here today, that they were hopeful of doing the keeper by the end of this week. So whether that was Neeland or whoever, but it hasn't materialised. And, we were just hypothesising before we came on air here. I mean, is there now a factor where Tim Krul isn't available again tomorrow? He's obviously out of self-isolation, but, as we all know, this is a situation at the minute where we don't know when he's going to be back in terms of, the symptoms. Daniel did, I thought, reference that he had some symptoms of fatigue. Tim himself had said that when he originally announced that he tested positive. So I wasn't hugely surprised that he's not going to be available for this weekend. But the case moving forward now is if he's unavailable for, I don't know, another week, 2 weeks, maybe even longer. And Neeland, I mean, you found some quotes that he did in an interview back in Norway in December, I think, where he's obviously had the back surgery and was more or less talking that he'd need the rest of this season almost just to re-acclimatise and get himself into a position where he can maybe then, from the start of next season, actually contest for the number one jersey at a club at the top end of English football, potentially, if it was to be England. So if he's not ready quite yet, it might have made sense if you were looking for a number two to Tim Krul, in that sense. But if Tim Krul's not available for any length of time, you probably do need somebody who's ready to go straight in. And then the other factor in play here is obviously young Barden. He played so well in the FA Cup last weekend. Daniel immediately after the game said, what it allows them to do is not panic, in the sense that they didn't feel, right, maybe he's not quite ready. He's proven he's not quite ready. When we thrust him into the first team environment, albeit cup rather than league, we need to be very active in the next few days and do a bit of business. So if Daniel performs again tomorrow, he'll keep the shirt. He'll play at Cardiff. If he performs again and shows he's mature enough to operate at this level, then maybe it buys him a little bit more breathing space just to see where Tim Krul is at over the next week or 2 weeks. So it feels like that maybe what's happened in the last week or so is there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of variables they're having to work through. And rather than maybe jump now and bring in an island if he's not quite ready, and then find out that he's not quite ready, and if Barden isn't quite ready as well, then you start to fear a little bit, is that going to be a destabilising factor in terms of, moving forward and what they're all trying to do, which is, seal the deal now in terms of Championship promotion. So I just think it's probably more a case of, yes, ideally they wanted to do it this week, but now with the Tim Krul situation, let's see how Daniel Barden gets on at Cardiff tomorrow. Maybe they just want to take a watching brief for a few more days and then act. But as you said rightly, Connor, it isn't just an island. There is a list of potential options, and they'll be working down them. And I think one thing we do realise with Webber, and it's been underlined again with the Giannoulis sort of potential business, that when Norwich act, they act pretty decisively and they're pretty smart about how they go about most of their recruitment. So I won't worry too much, but maybe it's just a watching brief for another week or so and see how other situations play out, mainly, of course, Tim Krul.
Yeah, I think after those talks, I think both parties have gone away and maybe assessed their options a little bit and just taken a little bit of time to assess whether it's right for them. So maybe next week will be the pivotal one in terms of that particular pursuit. Tom Colton, or hopefully I've pronounced that right, I said I used to think I was fairly decent at pronunciation, but I tell you, ever since I've started doing this and Norwich have started signing players from Greece, I think I've questioned that a little bit more. Tom Colton has said, "Hi guys, do you think a new centre-back will arrive this month, or are we happy with Bamadile if one of the other boys gets injured?" See, Bamadile I can do fine. What do you think of that, Paddy? He did kind of hint that potentially a centre-back they would stay awake, which is of course his famous quote, but he only said last week that maybe that situation had eased a little bit. So can you see them bringing in a centre-back this month, or do you think that's one that maybe will go on the back burner?
Well, as you say, I mean, when we were sat here this time last Friday, he very clearly stated, Daniel, that it was a keeper, it was a left back, and while at the end of last window, when you've lost Tim Closer, all the Tims, or you've allowed him to go to Basel, and then Ben Godfrey's gone as well, and then you were going into that portion of the new season with Ben Gibson not played a lot of football in the intervening 2 years, and injury concerns periodically around Grant Hanley and Christoph Zimmermann. Yes, a centre-back was very much on a par with the left-back, but subsequently, those three, at least two of those three, have been available pretty much all the way through. currently. Obviously, Christoph Zimmerman's been ruled out again tomorrow. That hip issue that forced him off at half-time against Coventry. Daniel said the diagnosis was 10 to 12 days, so he's working on him being available again for Bristol City. And that is the only way I see them actually going into the market and bringing in a centre-back in this window, is if one of Gibson, Zimmerman, Hanley do get themselves injured for any great length of time. And because then we're back to the situation they potentially would have faced at the end of the last window and the start of the new season. Otherwise, as you rightly said there, as the questioner said, Bamidele has impressed Daniel. He's now a fully fledged part of that first team setup in terms of training day in, day out. Daniel touched on he would have came on for his debut one of those last games recently at Carrow Road, but events overtook them. He was stripped and ready to come on in stoppage time. The game escapes me, but so he wouldn't be doing that, as he often also likes to say. He doesn't give out the gifts to these young players, so he clearly feels he's not that far away. Maybe not from a frontline option, but certainly to be in the mix. And if that is the case, I'm not sure Norwich probably will look to go into what is always, and he reiterated again today, a very, very difficult market in terms of player availability, in terms of the finances around players who are available in January. It doesn't really stack up for me that they're going to go out and go actively to bring in a centre-back who would compete with those other three senior options. So, no, I don't see that now. I think clearly the keeper, and clearly if the left-back's done, the focus will shift to the keeper. If they do the keeper, then it's probably going to be about keeping certain very highly rated young players in the building for the rest of this window, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll wrap this up on transfers in a moment. Just a couple of interesting points. Neil Lufus, first and foremost, said from YouTube, I understand Giannoulis has already tested positive for COVID. Will that have an impact? I think he tested positive in November, didn't he? So, no, still has to follow all the protocol, 10 days isolation, and as is the case for all elite sport at the moment. And then two interesting comments. Firstly, from Robert Fenn, who said, isn't that Gibson, Quintilla and this new left back all options to buy if we get promoted, actually spending some money this time if we go up? And then the second one from Vincent Mancy, who said, does the obligation to buy transfers that Norwich have made mean that this will affect their spending in the summer window if promoted? How do you see it, Pad, in terms of if they do go up and the money perhaps that will be available to them? Because obviously last time, quite famously, they perhaps didn't spend as much as people expected. This time, even though that, as Daniel Farke say, they had to pay for their sins, maybe now they have paid for their sins a little bit, barring this obviously new COVID hole that has emerged that maybe they weren't anticipating. What sort of state do you think they'll be in if they do go back up? Are they going to be in a position? I think these two deals maybe show that they're going to be in a better position, but are they going to be in a position to add to these if they do go up?
Well, they'll have to. There's no two ways about it, because it was proven definitively 2 years ago that group of players with the fairly surgically limited amount of, Ibrahim Amadou's, Patrick Roberts, Ralph Farman's, there was nowhere near good enough. So if they want to break the cycle of going up, coming down, going up straight away, then they will need to be active. There's no doubt about it. Question is how active they can be, and that is completely dependent on, as you say, the finances. I mean, in the negative column is the lack of revenue on a match day. And, they've talked about 12 million or around about that was the figure for last season they lost, and a similar figure and probably more now this season if we get to the end of the season now, and as looks likely there'll be no fans, certainly not on a grand scale, back at Carrow Road. So those are gaps that need to be plugged. Yes, they brought in funds from the Godfrey and Lewis sales. So, essentially, Quintilla, they're not going to sign him if they sign Giannoulis. So I think we can forget about Xavi Quintilla. Sam Barham, of course, is in that equation as well, not lest we forget. So basically, they've committed to, let's say, 15, 16 million in terms of Gibson and Giannoulis. So I think they've clearly committed to that. But you're getting Premier League revenue again, allied to, probably have, because they were quite astute in how they went about it 2 years ago. And even with that huge hole they couldn't have really foreseen in terms of lack of revenue, I still think they're in a fairly healthy, stable financial position. So there is funds there. But, of course, they will need to. And Daniel's said this.
Oh, I think
I'm back, mate.
There we go. That was either you or me. Carry on.
Yeah, I don't know. Was I just talking into the ether then, or not? Maybe.
You might have been. We're back anyway.
All right, yeah, no worries. But, I mean, basically, Daniel said it, just to wrap up, Daniel said it all along. If they go back to the top table next time around, they will have paid for the sins of the past, and they'll be able to attract a better grade of player. And you're starting to see that, Giannoulis, 2 years ago, don't think Norwich had been able to do that type of deal. In fact, was it Kenny McLean they did in the January they went up? And I know he was with a view to the summer, but, you contrast those two levels of deal in terms of the finances, in terms of the pedigree of player, and that's no disrespect to Kenny McLean, then that's probably where Norwich are at now. And to do that, of course, means they're going to have to spend money. So, yeah, I think we could definitely see a lot more business if they do go up, and the business they do will be of a higher grade. And, that will be a testament to how Farke and probably more so Webber and the board and the executive have managed the finances through a very, very testing time. If you're down 25 million or so in terms of revenue, in terms of season ticket sales and match day revenue, that would test any club, but particularly a self-funded club. So, I think it is a huge testament to what they have done in terms of the foresight they've shown, even in the midst of a pandemic, which none of us have ever lived through before and hopefully never have to again, that they're still able to, in this window, go and commit to that level of deal. But obviously the caveat is only if they go up again in 5 or 6 months.
Just finally on Greece and your knowledge, Matt Gregory wants to know if you've got any recommendations for a good Greek beer.
I'd have to ask George. I could WhatsApp him and maybe give you an answer by the end of the show. But maybe the next time round, if you ask me again, I'll have an answer. But no, I don't think. No, he was more a wine man, George. So I could get you a good red wine. Well, Tony, the producer, says Mythos. I don't know if we're pronouncing that correctly or not. That's probably not even...
You're the man who knows, aren't you? So
you might be up the street there. That's probably not even beer. That's probably olives or something like that.
Quite possibly, right? That's all the transfer stuff, I think. So hopefully we've included some questions. Just finally, actually, getting a few questions on Sam Byram and his progress. Where do you feel he is? He's someone that Daniel Farke hasn't really spoken about recently. He did say that, of course, he was still out at the moment, though. And thanks, Tom, for your very nice comment about the content we produce. So there you go. Question from Canada on Sam Byram.
Well, I wouldn't say it overly feels positive to me. I mean, Daniel is loath to put any timeline on it at all. We all know the backdrop that it was around about this time last year, February of last year. He did his hamstring against Liverpool, had the surgery. Then he had quite an unusual reaction to, I think, one of the pins, wasn't it, in the injury? That didn't, whether it didn't knit or there was some sort of adverse reaction to the extent they had to basically go for another surgery, take that pin out, and restart the process. And the last we heard, which was 2 or 3 weeks ago now, was this was a crucial period in terms of if he could step it up and in terms of being able to bear load on the injury and to be able to run again. And I think ultimately the feel, I think it was you, Connor, who was saying the feeling, I think, in terms of their sports science and physio department is he will get back at some point. But it's just when, and that's the imponderable at the minute. And, ultimately, it's a bit like the Marco Stiepermann scenario in terms of, they kept getting him to a point where they were trying to push him on and then he just physically wasn't able to do it. And they've obviously diagnosed that he's had this virus, Epstein-Barr, I think Daniel said it was called today, which attacked his immune system. So at least they've got a definitive diagnosis now, and now they can build him back up. And it'll be the same with Sam Byram. But ultimately, everybody has to be guided by the player himself, and if and only if he's ready to step it up again. But we're now mid-January, and there's no signs of him, like the Adamidas or the Bali Mumbas or Nel Hernandez being anywhere near even ready to resume light training. With each passing week, you start to think, well, probably maybe not for this season, which would be a shame because up until his injury, he was arguably Norwich's standout performer, I thought, in the Premier League. So he has been a miss. Again, it's testament to Sorensen particularly, but Quintilla before his injury problem, that they were able to compensate. And, of course, Jamal Lewis moving on as well. But yeah, there's no doubt they could get Sam Byram back to the levels he was the last time we were in the Premier League for when they hopefully go back to the Premier League. then that'd almost be feeling like a new signing. We just talked in the previous question there about what will Norwich do in the summer. Yes, they'll do business, but can you imagine if you've got a fit and firing Sam Byram ready to go again? That would feel like a new signing for me.
Yeah, and of course the beauty about him is that he can play right back and left back as well. So in terms of that cover, even if we're then talking about maybe a Xavi Quintilla or a Giannoulis going back, then they do have a replacement ready there, and they could then shift Sam McCallum back out on loan for another year of development. So lots of moving parts in that, and hopefully he does get back. Whilst we're on sort of the subject of injury, and I've just noticed that Ollie's commented and said that it's 2 out of 2 for you in terms of Greek pronunciations tonight. So good work, Pad. It felt like a traditional Colney press conference today in regards to injury, mainly because of the positive COVID cases, which we won't delve into too much because we spoke about them a lot on last week. That's now 4 players, and I think it was 5 backroom staff members, 1 physio, and 3 sports scientists that have now tested positive. 9, obviously, of course, are affected in that 2-week period. Daniel, I felt, was a little bit more reflective today, maybe than he was last week in terms of what it means for football as a whole, and obviously the emphasis that's been put on the new protocol. How much of a concern do you think there will be within the group at the moment about these positive tests and these positive cases? Because I can imagine if I'm a Norwich City player going into Colney, going to play football, travelling to South Wales tomorrow even, there would be a degree of concern about whether or not I was safe doing the job that I do, I guess.
Yeah, and on a broader point, that sort of flows into which has gained traction in the last few days about goal celebrations and limiting that because of the need to maybe sort of reduce social contacts. And as Daniel said, that's fine, but then what about you're in a defensive wall defending a free kick and you're not stood 2 meters aside from either of your teammates, or man-to-man zonal marking when Norwich managed to do it properly on set pieces. Close proximity again, all joking aside. And yeah, you touched on it, travelling to games, staying in the hotel. They'll be based in a base heading down towards the West Country tonight. Changing room, in the dressing room before a game, during a game, after a game. Very hard in those environments to adhere to strictly to the 2 meters, 3 meters. Some people want to sort of adhere to now social protocols. And in terms of the testing, the standout line for me from Daniel's discussion on this topic today was, this is the new normal now. That was his phrase. This is the new normal. And he is now planning for, he said, 8 to 10 weeks from here. So he's thinking all of January, February into March, as he said, until warmer temperatures, until the vaccine really starts to roll out in terms of mass beyond the most vulnerable groups. He's really planning now every week. He's going to be missing players who've tested positive. And from week to week, we've had 2 players before the Cov game. Yes, of course, Adamida wasn't available anyway because he's coming back from a knee problem. But 2 senior players unavailable, two more senior players unavailable for this game. Lucas Rupp and Josh Martin, worth pointing out, have tested negative but have flu-like symptoms, so they're staying behind as well. And ultimately, Daniel now is planning that for the next 2 months or so, on a weekly basis almost, he's going to be without players. And that, first and foremost, it's about the health of these individuals, and that applies to the backroom staff. As Daniel said, it's about the health of human beings rather than the footballing impact. But in a purely footballing sense, it isn't going to help Norwich's cause at all if they're going to be without, starting to be without key players. But as he said, you see Wickham have called games off. I see earlier today, Brentford have shut the place down for 2 games, haven't they? Thomas Frank tested positive. As Daniel said, it's not just simply Norwich. Every club now, whether it's the Championship, Football Leagues 1 and 2, or even the Premier League, you'll increasingly see are going to be impacted by this. And that's why Daniel says it's the new normal. And while they continue to play football, then that is something they're going to have to deal with. And as Daniel said, football is a microcosm of society. And if this is happening on a huge scale in society, then it's going to happen in football. And it's just how Norwich move forward, really. But, it's probably inevitable that at some point it was going to start to impact on Norwich's season. And it remains to be seen how big that impact is going to be moving forward.
Yeah, I saw a report today, I think it was from someone from the BBC, who says the EFL testing at the moment is those lateral flow tests first, and it's only if there's a positive on one of those, they then get the sort of more traditional COVID tests that we've seen with the 2 swabs, and maybe a little bit longer in terms of the result coming back. It's only then they they take one of those, which is quite an interesting dynamic as well. We're not going to dwell on this for too long. Obviously, we send our well wishes and we wish everyone involved a speedy recovery. As we kind of touched upon, Tim Krul not available this weekend, still feeling the effects of COVID, still got a little bit of fatigue, but feeling a little bit better. Adam Eder, the same as well. And Daniel said today the symptoms amongst the other guys involved aren't too bad at the moment. So hopefully everyone can get back to full health very, very soon. Just to touch upon a few of the injuries, Christos Zimmerman we've spoken about, out with a small hip injury, already doing individual work. They hope to get him back for Bristol City. Lucas Rupp and Josh Martin also ill. They had some symptoms of COVID, but have both tested negative, which is good news. And then Marco Stiepermann, which again you kind of touched upon, but I want to speak about a little bit more. Epstein-Barr is the virus that he had, essentially a virus that attacks the immune system. He's had some trouble with his ear. They initially thought it was an ear infection, didn't they? In terms of his recovery and maybe his performances this season, which have looked a little bit sluggish, and I just felt he looked very heavy when he played, if I'm honest, and you could tell that he was feeling the effects of something. How much of a boost would it be to Norwich if they can build him back up to the level that they had last time they were in the Championship, when he was such an effective player for them, wasn't he? And so productive in terms of his attacking output.
Yeah, and ultimately that relationship he had with Teemu Pukki as well, which I don't think Teemu's had with any other player. Subsequently, there's been various characters tried in that role, and he, in terms of the blend, has certainly been the best, particularly in the defining part of the Championship season 2 years ago. And I think that's the key. If again, we're talking about the health first and foremost of the individual, but if he gets to a position where he's able to really be a viable option down the stretch, whether that was, Daniel, again, didn't really want to put a timeline on it today, but you got the sense it's going to be weeks rather than days. So, if it's March, April, May, we're still playing football first and foremost, and Marcus Stiepermann is available, then and fully fit and ready to contribute, then I think that could be a great option as well. Kieran Dowell obviously is in that conversation, and there was some good news to follow on from him today. He was potentially going to miss this game as well. He was another one who had the ankle operation earlier in the season. Still had a bit of discomfort prior to the Coventry FA Cup tie, so they went and removed the screw, I think Daniel said, and was likely to miss the cup game and this weekend. But by all accounts, we spoke to him before the final training session prior to the squad heading down to the West Country, and Daniel said basically he came through that. He had been doing a little bit as the week had progressed, that he would be an option for the squad tomorrow. So that is positive news. But as I say, and the notable thing 2 years ago for me was when it really got to that critical phase of the season, how many options Daniel had. I think they were very good in terms of the fitness and the injury record in those last 2 or 3 months of that season. If they could get to that position again, then, because inevitably, particularly this season of all seasons, with the concertinaed nature of it and the demands on the players, if you could have the vast majority of your squad available, COVID allowing, of course, then I think that just reinforces that Norwich have probably got as strong a squad as any other team in the division. So that would be a lovely position to be in if he could call on Marco Stiepermann, fit and firing Marco Stiepermann, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, and hopefully he can get him back, because ever since they got promoted to the Premier League, they've struggled to really pin down that number 10 position, haven't they? Duda played there, obviously Stiepermann in the Premier League. Kenny McLean had a little go there. Mario Vrancic has played there as well. It's been the one position in their attack that maybe you look at and think they haven't necessarily nailed down. So if they can get that Marco Stiepermann back, then that's certainly a scary prospect at this level. Let's look at the game tomorrow. Then it's going to be almost a clash of styles, isn't it? We know how Cardiff want to play. We saw that at Carrow Road, although Norwich, maybe Dan Barden in particular, will be thankful that Sean Morrison is it looks like he's going to miss tomorrow's game. Kiefer Moore as well is a bit of a doubt. Looks like he will be involved on the bench or in some capacity though. How do Norwich City approach this one away from home, where maybe the emphasis is going to be more on Cardiff to ask a few more questions than they did at Carrow Road? I know that Neil Harris is slowly trying to shift the philosophy, shift the style of play there to perhaps a bit more of a possession-based one. Obviously, their form isn't particularly great. He's a man under pressure. They're a team who feel they should be pushing for the playoffs, currently 15th in the table, as you can see via this graphic there. How difficult a task is this going to be for Norwich City tomorrow, particularly given sort of the nature of their squad at the moment as we've kind of mapped it out?
Well, I mean, the interesting thing, that graphic Tony's put up there is the 4 L's in terms of Cardiff. I mean, basically, since Norwich beat them, they've lost the next 3 games. So there's no question when they came to Carrow Road, you thought more than justifiably in the conversation for the top 6, and now they're starting to not get cut adrift, but certainly need to turn it around quickly. And I think Neil Harris has acknowledged that in his press conference in the last day or two, that it does need to turn quickly. Very ambitious owner there. Still Vincent Tan, isn't it? I think I'm right in saying. And he would expect that Harris is, particularly off the back of getting them to the playoffs last season, that they at least, that's the bare minimum. And then hopefully they go 1 step better, 2 steps better, and get themselves promoted. But yeah, I mean, Kiefer Moore is a big player for them in terms of how Harris likes to construct the attacking area of his side. So if he was available, that would change the dynamic a little bit from the Carrow Road game. But ultimately, I thought Norwich were very controlled on that day. That was the Buendia and Cantwell show, of course. And, of course, Barden injects a degree of uncertainty into the equation. But, given that Cardiff are pretty decent aerially, I won't be too concerned because he's a big, powerful lad. And the 2 games we've seen, both Luton and, 1.5 games, because he played half a game against QPR, and then obviously last weekend, I didn't think he was found wanting. He was, by the end of that game last week, he was coming for crosses and commanding his area. So less concerned about that, more so that Cardiff really probably know as a group of players and their management that it needs to turn quickly, otherwise there may be changes afoot. And of course, there's one other thing. We're talking about health a lot tonight, and they've had the news around Sol Bamba, who's been diagnosed with cancer, or at least they've made that public. The cancer diagnosis. Neil Harris himself recovered from cancer to play again in his Millwall days, and I saw some quotes there again from his pre-match saying it's been his toughest week in football, dealing with that and the impact on Sol and his family and the rest of the squad. Now, that could just galvanise them, couldn't it? That could just rally that group even tighter to almost want to try and put a performance on for quite a talismanic figure in their setup. So it's hard to know exactly what Norwich will face tomorrow in terms of the mood around Cardiff as a club. But ultimately, I think you take Tim Krul out of it, may be Lucas Rock to a degree, and okay, they're missing 9 or 10 players tomorrow, Norwich, but a lot of the frontline options should be available. Touch wood. No more COVID-related news in the next 24 hours. And if that is the case, and it's pretty much the same lineup, bar the keeper, obviously, who played in that game just before Christmas, you'd still think Norwich have a bit too much for Cardiff, really. A Cardiff team who, as that graphic showed, are in a bit of a rut at the minute. So the confidence isn't going to be particularly high. And if Norwich are professional and set their stall out properly, then, I'd fully expect them to go there and get a result and keep the show on the road.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to be important that they don't engage themselves with Cardiff style of play, and they ensure it's not an arm wrestle, and they don't drag themselves to that level, because that will then play into Cardiff's hands. It's this time of the show that we usually ask for your score predictions, so get them in, and we'll be producer Tony will be flashing them on screen as we continue talking. Just a few more points before we wrap up. Neil Harris has been very, very complimentary of Norwich. I know that in previous weeks he described them as being better than Marcelo Bielsa's Leeds United side that went up last year. Part of me wonders how much of that is him playing on his reputation at Millwall and obviously that rivalry they have with Leeds. But very nice words, and also some more nice words ahead of this game as well. So clearly a man who really rates this Norwich side and knows how difficult it will be for his team tomorrow.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily see him and Farker as sort of, coaching bedfellows in terms of their philosophy and approach, but there seems to be a personal chemistry there. Whenever their teams have met in the time Farker's been here, that I think Harris has always been pretty complimentary to Daniel and his coaching and the teams he puts out on the pitch, and I think it is genuine. But maybe he's hoping a little bit of flattery will ensure Daniel and his players take their eye off the ball a little bit. I'm not sure that will be the case, but I suppose you've got to try any tactic going when you're on a 4-game losing run. But it's, as a man, I quite like him. He's seems to be pretty straight down the line type of character, and he's did a great job to get Cardiff into the playoffs. But ultimately, a bit like Norwich, they're a club who have been in and around the Premier League in recent years, and the expectation is probably that they should be striving for a bit more. So there's no doubt he will find himself under pressure if this run continues. So he definitely needs a result tomorrow, and that's why Norwich really needs, as Daniel said today, they were comfortable or controlled is probably a better word at Carrow Road in that 2-0 win just before Christmas, but it was still a little bit concerning on the set pieces, particularly. Michael McGovern made 1 or 2 excellent saves, as you said, from the boy Morrison that day. So it wasn't all plain sailing as much as you felt Norwich for control that day. And as Daniel said, they'll probably need a similar type of performance tomorrow, because one thing you do know with the Harris side is you know what's going to be coming, and whether it's Kiefer Moore or whether it's Glatz or the big lad they had up front, you've got Harry Wilson, who I thought was pretty disappointing on the day at Carrow Road, given his pedigree. A lad they've got in on loan from Liverpool, very fortunate to stay on the pitch. That was a shocking tackle on Todd Cantwell at the end, only got a yellow card, let his frustration boil over. But I was expecting going into that Carrow Road game that he would be the sort of, impish figure pulling the strings, a little bit like Barry Bannon when Sheffield Wednesday came a few weeks prior to that. Didn't really happen that day, but, tomorrow he's certainly got the quality. If he has a good day tomorrow, then Cardiff will probably have a good day. So it's important that Norwich's creative players continue to almost be in the ascendant in that particular battle within a battle.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw Barry said 3-1 and he said good afternoon from Ashburn in the USA. So good afternoon, Barry. Thank you very much for watching. Just finally, Pad, let's get your sort of, we'll say prediction, although maybe a bit more consider that. How do you see this game going? I mean, you kind of hinted there that you maybe expect Norwich to go on and extend their positive form in the league. How do you expect this game to sort of pan out, given all the uncertainty that Norwich City have at the moment and given some of the big key players that Cardiff are going to be without?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like there's so many stories beyond the mere fact that it's Norwich going to Cardiff tomorrow, trying to get 3 points to keep the position where it is in terms of their gap to the rest at the top of the Championship. And you just hope that they can remain focused, because it must be very difficult, with your teammates testing positive, other guys showing similar symptoms, but unable to travel because they're erring on the side of caution. You've got backroom staff as well. Very, very difficult just to, put all that to one side and just focus on the job in hand. So, there are some imponderables going into tomorrow's game, but ultimately, you can't veer too far from what we saw not all that long ago. I mean, it was less than just about a month ago, in fact, at Carrow Road. And when you put Cardiff's template against Norwich's, I thought Norwich's was far superior. So, if they can handle some of the turbulence and some of the issues around going into this weekend, fundamentally, I think Norwich should have too much for Cardiff. So, yeah, I'm pretty confident 2-1, 3-1. I think I'm going to say, mate. What about you?
Yeah, I think Norwich will win this. I can't see Cardiff not scoring. I think it will be a 2-1. But yeah, I think Norwich will just about edge it, given what you said there, given the template that we had in December, where Norwich did look too good for Cardiff that day. And if that repeats itself, then there's only one way you can see it going. We've had a comment from Mike Watts. We'll just end with this. Who said, in bed with COVID, hope the pink and team and yellows keep safe. I wouldn't wish this on anyone. Get well soon, Mike. I hope you recover soon. It's a pretty dreadful illness. Nigel Sansom, we'll win 2-1 OTBC. Think it will be a tough game, but we'll come out winners. There you go. We'll end on that from Nigel. Pinken.com, the place to go. We're not going to be travelling to South Wales tomorrow, but you'll get all the usual coverage from us from Norfolk. So make sure you look out for that. We're going to end with a video of the away days. None of us can travel tomorrow, but we'll be there in spirit. Thank you very much for watching. Stay safe. Thanks for all your comments and questions. See you soon.